the guns shout above our heads, and we kiss as though nothing could fall. And the shame was on the other side. Oh, we can beat them forever and ever, and we can be heroes just for one day.
Welcome to my studio visit. I'm so happy that everybody could log on to this Instagram Live. Some of you know me already, some of you don't. I'm Miles Ladin, and I'm an artist. I'm a photographic artist. And I'm really excited to have this lockdown open studio to bring you guys into my studio during this challenging time for everybody. You know, if you are unwell, it's very challenging. If you're stuck at home, it's less challenging, but still we're all feeling something at this very unique moment in time in history. And I wanted to connect and perhaps provide some art, some entertainment, some connection with the community, with people that are interested in humanity and pictures and aesthetics and art and color and beauty and pain, and celebrating the multifaceted world and life that we each have a privilege to be in. So welcome. 3 months ago, it was a relatively different world, a much different world, in fact. We just started hearing about this coronavirus in China. Some of us would make jokes calling it Zozekis, but basically we just didn't know to the extent that it would affect our lives and be devastating. In early March, I made my third trip to Belgium to make artwork that I had made over the last several years. My first trip was in 2015 to go to the hometown of James Ensor and make images. Last year, I went to Bentia, the carnival in Bentia, which is in the Wallonia area. And I decided this March to return to Ostend and continue making pictures about this very interesting time when people wear masks and are able to transcend their normal day-to-day existence and to embrace the other. Some of it has to do with being an American in this location and bringing a different set of references and interpretations and questioning. This character on the top is a very well-known European sort of a character, but the fact that they have guns and they're wearing this red, and it's much more abstracted. And then, of course, the picture on the bottom, for an American, it has other layers of upsetting connotations. However, it was actually at a museum that was showcasing carnival costumes. The top one was in Ostende, and I just found that so interesting, and in a way it speaks to this current moment. We're all in our homes, we're all wrapped, hidden, but we're still there. There's certainly trauma on the streets. We see an empty lot that's totally been dug up with for sale signs and a gate, and it just looks very foreboding in a certain way. And it becomes the opposite of the last picture that I took in Europe before I came back from the pandemic. And this was a picture taken in Bruges, and I had to come back early right after that because of the lockdown and the airports, and I had to change my trip, so I never got to go to Antwerp. We've all had to make changes and sacrifices in this challenging time, and although this is a very minor sacrifice, I didn't get to see Antwerp, and I missed an important meeting I was looking forward to at the museum library to look at firsthand, to look at actual James Ensor prints. So coming back through Newark Airport, I had to basically self-isolate for 2 weeks. This was before the rest of the state was isolating. You know, after that, things just became dystopian in a certain way. And here we are, months later, the entire world is isolating. Here we have a couple pictures that sort of relate to our moment, but also relate to this idea of dystopian reality, perhaps fear, perhaps giddiness. The top one is my most recent piece that I've completed. Sometimes I do pictures where I just splatter some ink on the paper. I've been doing a lot of works on black paper. Actually, both of these pieces started that way, with no idea of what I was going to really do. The top one, I felt like it was going to be a landscape because I really hadn't done any kind of landscape. So I thought of sort of something in the sky, not necessarily stars, but something. And the one on the bottom, experimenting with black paper and white ink and silver ink. And I just sort of see shapes in these things. And that's how this one developed. You know, here we have a scenario that I will leave to interpretation. We have music, and we have sort of a British character with an umbrella, and we have this wonderful mythological guy and clowns, and then we have seminal fluid exploding on the scene with a voluptuous woman who's exploded her physicality into the ether. Before the lockdown, I had been making a smaller series combining images related to fashion as well as African wildlife and safari. I had friends that came back from safari with pictures that really inspired me. Large piece on the right is an oil painting, and basically the name of that picture is a baboon in front of Dolce & Gabbana fabric. It's this dichotomy between the floral, the aesthetic, the Western commerce idea of fake nature printed on fabric perhaps, and the brutality of wildlife. Also, maybe you see advertisements of these models where they're in the locations that are a little bit false in terms of wearing fashion. The picture of the eagle on the left was inspired by these horrible, horrible fires in California, or in Australia and California. And so it does tie in with these other things. And that was on cardboard with gouache. We have a series of drawings where I've utilized a motif and expanded on them to do a series of pictures related to that motif. They're erotic themes in a certain way. I've used a motif or a composition and then experimented and expanded that composition through multiples. So they're unique pieces, but they expand on a theme. The top one is called Pearl Necklace, and it just occurred to me this double entendre would be an interesting thing perhaps to utilize for sort of a certain kind of picture making where I'm implementing commercial art in terms of the line of the pearls and the splattering of ink, which I've been doing a lot of experimenting with and wanted to see how that looked with the white ink, as well as freehand drawing. One can think of Picasso's erotic drawings. Those were probably more autobiographical, mine are not. A little more autobiographical is the series on the bottom, based on an advertisement from a party in Provincetown, Massachusetts, a go-go boy party, and they give them out on the street. And I took it. I loved the design of it. I thought it was evocative, classic, sentimental in a certain way. The first thing I did with that was I did an oil painting on a board. With this painting was to make it very simple, almost like 20th century, where it was sort of just using something as a springboard, you know, as an excuse for abstract expressionism. And then from there I did 3 versions on paper, experimented and broke it down. This image here, we have the go-go dancer, but then he's upside down in rough paint. Like a lot of people, when the virus morphed into this full-fledged pandemic, I started to think about the influenza epidemic of 1918. And I found some amazing images online of the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, these amazing women who were heroes in 1918, and they reminded me of the heroes of today, the medical personnel, the nurses, but also the essential workers in our supermarkets, in our buildings that we live in, picking up the garbage, driving the subways, and looking at images and photographs of 1918. Of course, we also had a World War, and I started looking at images on the internet of World War I, and particularly thinking about my grandfather. He was a soldier for the Americans, picking up the bodies on the battlefields, and they're wearing these masks, and of course I'm very interested in masks, and instead of the masks for the pandemic, they're wearing gas masks, and the poppies are the flower of memorial. They're the flower of World War I, and I believe all wars in a certain way. As I had mentioned, part of my process often is to utilize chance in terms of mark making and how my mind sees images. So I've been doing quite a few drawings where I throw down ink, letting it dry, and then seeing what images sort of speak to me. This was a large watercolor and ink piece that I think on some level I thought it would be a portrait, but I really didn't have anything more than that. For some reason it reminded me of this painting of Christ that's at the Metropolitan Museum of Art by an artist, Messina. And I've always been taken with that portrait. It just has so much gravitas. And all of these pieces here were done that way, where I splattered some ink. The photograph was taken in a few years back, but I thought it was apropos to this selection of images. And this was the ossuary in a church in Milan. I think it talks to this idea of, you know, the ultimate isolation, and also the idea of the individual and the group. In July, I am going to have a virtual exhibition, and it's going to be in a 3D space that you will be able to navigate. And I'm very excited about this technology. I was first introduced to it by the Boris Lurie Art Foundation, and they have created a very exciting platform that you can visit when you go to the foundation's website. And this inspired me to do a virtual exhibition for myself. So it's going to be 1 month, July to August. I don't have the exact dates yet. You'll be able to navigate and interact with me and my work on the beach or remotely, and we can have a dialogue. I'm going to try to do some events. It's just a new platform, you know, it's new possibilities, and I think that's what we all have to sort of focus on and be creative and sort of think about. We will get through this. And art is certainly one way to get through this very challenging time. Be safe, be well, speak soon.